Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about something that I've been wanting to see for a really long time. This is the Mobula7 HDZero, and it's the first HDZero bind and fly whoop. As usual for my videos, we're going to start by talking about the specs, I'm going to show you some flights, and I'm going to tell you why I'm excited about this drone and whether I think it's for you. Let's go ahead and start with a product overview. The Mobula7 HDZero is a 75mm whoop based on one of the newer Mobula7 frames. It has 1102 motors running at 9000 kV, driving 40mm newbie drone tri-blade props. The drone runs on 2 to 3S battery power and has an XT30 connector. The flight controller is a new all-in-one board that we haven't seen before. It has 12-amp ESCs, Express LRS built in, and runs on 2 to 4S input voltage. On the video side, we've got the HDZero Whoop VTX with a dipole antenna and the Nano HDZero camera. The overall weight of the drone is 41 grams without a battery. Let me go ahead and give you guys my thoughts on these specs. So first of all, the Mobula7 HDZero is a collaboration between Happy Model and HDZero. So it's HDZero branded, and that's probably the brand that you'll see in stores, but Happy Model helped design a lot of this drone. They put it together, and they'll be the ones that are actually supporting the whoop parts of this drone. Now I think Happy Model picked a pretty good set of parts for this drone. I'm familiar with those frames, I've used those many times in the past, and they're very sturdy, so it should hold up well in crashes. The canopy is a design that I haven't seen before, but it feels pretty good. I don't see any weak points on it. Again, feeling pretty good about the durability there. I'm also happy with the motor choice. I think it was a good idea to use 1102 motors for the added power. These motors also have a 1.5mm shaft, which is going to be a little bit more durable and a little bit less likely to bend in crashes, so that's a good thing. The lower kV number on these motors is also going to give it more torque, and again, I think it's really going to help with the added weight of having that HDZero VTX on this drone. And I'm really excited about the flight controller that they're using on this drone. I've actually been waiting for this board for a pretty long time, so I put Express LRS on all of my stuff now. I like it a lot, and having it built into the flight controller just makes things so much simpler. Now I don't have to have an external receiver, I don't have to run all those wires and deal with the possibility of that breaking or, adding weight. So that's really nice, and it's just great to have it just built in, just a single board that does all that stuff. The 12-amp ESC should help if you'd like to use turtle mode. It'll give you a little bit more durability than some of those 5-amp ESCs that we see. And overall, I just think that was a really good choice for this drone. The flight controller does support external receivers, so if you're running FrSky or Tracer or Crossfire or any of those other protocols, you can add an external receiver and wire it to the flight controller. On the video side, obviously I'm excited that they've put HDZero in this. I mean, it's kind of the headlining feature of the whoop, but I think that this setup is going to perform really well on that video side. The Nano HDZero camera was a really good choice for this. I just think that camera has really great performance in such a small size. It was the ideal choice of camera for this whoop. And in terms of the weight, I actually think 41 grams is really respectable for this size of whoop. I was a little bit worried about this because, we know that the HDZero VTX is going to add some weight, and we know that that nano camera is maybe a little bit heavier than some of the really small nano cameras that people put in analog drones. But it turns out that they were able to keep it pretty light. 41 grams is a really good weight, and especially with using those 1102 motors, that's going to help a lot. I don't think it's going to be too big of a problem. So I was glad they were able to keep the weight down. I do want to quickly mention that there are going to be a couple of small design changes to this whoop in the production run. First, they're going to be swapping out the video dipole antenna with a slightly longer version, and they're going to run it out the back of the canopy, so that's going to make it a little bit more sleek, less likely to catch on things, and if anything, a longer antenna should perform a bit better. They're also going to be adjusting that canopy just a little bit to get the camera a little bit higher up off of the VTX board. That's going to help a bit with getting more camera angles. You'll still be able to get a 0-degree camera angle or a higher camera angle, but it's just going to give you more adjustability. And finally, they're going to be shortening the power lead by a little bit, so that's just going to keep everything a little bit more tidy underneath and hopefully reduce weight a little bit. So that just about does it for the specs. Like I said, I'm pretty happy with the parts they've chosen. I think if I was designing this whoop, this is about how I would have set it up, so I'm pretty hopeful about it. I think it's going to fly pretty well. But let's go ahead and move on to that side of things. So I'm going to tell you what it was like to actually set this up and what it was like to fly. So we all know that when you first get a new drone, you've got to do a little bit of setup before you can go out and start flying. Let me tell you what I had to do to get this one in the air. This is something that's really nice about having an HDZero bind and fly whoop, is that a lot of the Betaflight configuration's already done for you. This is something that tends to trip people up because to set up HDZero in Betaflight, there are a couple of settings that you have to change and you have to do some CLI commands, and it always seems like it trips people up figuring out exactly how to set that up. So what's really nice about this Whoop is that all of that's done for you. You don't have to do any Betaflight configuration related to HDZero. There are only a couple of things that you actually have to do to get going. The first thing that you do need to do is update the HDZero firmware on the VTX. Now the reason you have to do that is because HDZero is advancing so quickly and constantly releasing new firmware, and you need that firmware version to match between the VTX and the video receiver. Now, unless you just happen to really get lucky, chances are the firmware that happened to be loaded on this VTX when it was manufactured isn't going to match whatever you have on your receiver. So it's a good idea to go ahead and update that firmware whenever you get this drone. Fortunately, updating that firmware is a pretty simple process. I have a video on it, and there's also a manual that has some information, so I'll go ahead and link both of those in the description below. Once you've done that, all you need to do is bind this drone to your ExpressLRS transmitter and do any other modes or configuration that you would typically want to do for a new drone. A couple of quick notes on that binding. So it's very simple to actually bind the drone. You can just go to the receiver tab in Betaflight, and there's a bind receiver button. You click that, and then put your transmitter in bind mode, and it will bind it to the Whoop. When I set this up, I did notice that the ExpressLRS receiver on the all-in-one board really only likes 250 Hz or below. So if you're someone who normally uses 500 Hz with ExpressLRS, I'd recommend bumping that down to 250. I also believe they're going to be shipping this drone with firmware that is made to work with ExpressLRS 2.0. So if you haven't updated to ExpressLRS 2.0 yet, you're going to want to go ahead and update your transmitter module and any other ExpressLRS receivers to ExpressLRS 2.0. Fortunately, ExpressLRS is really good. It's worth upgrading. I recently did a video on that as well if you need to know how to do it or if you want to know what features it has, but make sure you upgrade to ExpressLRS 2.0. One last thing I'll say about setup, if you get confused on anything, definitely check out the manual that comes with this Whoop. I actually had a chance to provide some feedback on that manual and help point out some things that I thought they could clarify to make it easier to understand and help you get up and running. And I think that it is actually a really good manual. So if you get stuck on anything, I definitely recommend checking that out. But that's really about all the setup you have to do. Like I said, it's pretty simple, pretty easy to do. And once you've done that, you're ready to go out and fly. So let's go ahead and move on and talk about how the Mobula7 HDZero flies. So like I said, this drone supports 2S and 3S batteries, and the manual has some different recommended capacities you can use. I'll go ahead and put those on the screen so you can see. Now, I only had the chance to fly it on 2S, so all of my impressions are with a 2S battery, but I know Ryan Quellet has flown it on 3S. I've seen some of his flight footage, and it looks like it flies really well on 3S as well. So if you get this drone, that might be something to try. But for this review, I'm going to be focusing on 2S. Overall, I was really pleased with the way this Whoop flew. Now, I've flown some of those quote-unquote HD Whoops in the past that have a split camera on them, and they weigh a lot, and they're kind of sluggish and not really that fun to fly. And I thought that with that HDZero VTX adding some extra weight to this one, I was kind of afraid I was going to have the same problem, but I didn't have that issue at all. Those 1102 motors at that low kV really give this a lot of power and a lot of low-end torque, and so I didn't feel any of that sluggishness at all. It actually felt pretty fast and pretty fun to fly. It feels very responsive to control inputs, it's very nimble, and you know, it didn't feel very floaty. So sometimes when you fly a drone, if you try to make a sharp turn, it kind of feels like the drone slides around that turn and kind of slides out a little bit. And that can be kind of nice for certain freestyle tricks, but if you're trying to do precision flying or racing, it's not very desirable. I mean, you kind of want it to turn on a dime so that you can go where you need to go. I felt like this drone did really well with that. It's the way that I prefer to fly, so I really enjoyed it. I imagine that's mostly due to the prop choice that they chose, so you might get different performance if you swapped out the props. It flies well both indoors and out. ExpressLRS is really responsive to control inputs, and that locked-in feeling makes it easier to fly indoors around obstacles. It can still handle itself outside. Now, any Whoop isn't going to do too well with high wind, but I didn't have any trouble in normal conditions flying it outdoors. In terms of freestyle, I'm not really a freestyle pilot. I focus more on racing and cine, but I will show you a punch out so you can get an idea of what the upwards acceleration is. I do feel like it's going to be more than capable of doing freestyle tricks. Like I said, it's just very responsive to inputs. It doesn't have any trouble doing rolls or flips or anything like that. One negative flight characteristic that's really common on Whoops is prop wash, and I did get some prop wash on this, especially as I was getting to lower voltage on that 2S battery. There are a couple of settings in Betaflight that help with this. You can turn on dynamic idle, you can set the motor's idle percentage a little bit higher, and you can set a throttle curve. So all of those things do help reduce that. I didn't do those for this review because I wanted to fly it with the tune out of the box, but those are things that would probably help reduce that prop wash. Let's talk too about flight time, which is something that I think is really important on whoops. You know, I don't want to take off and then have to land a minute and a half later because I'm already out of battery. I found it to be quite good on this whoop. I was actually surprised at how good it was. With a 2S 300 milliamp hour battery, which is really small, I was getting over 3 minutes, and with a larger 525 milliamp hour battery, I was getting 4.5 minutes or even 5 minutes if I was flying really gently or really slow. I felt like this was good performance. It's right in line with other whoops I've seen, so I was happy with that. Those were also older batteries, and you do tend to get better performance from a newer battery. In terms of 3S, I know Ryan Quellet said he was getting over 4 minutes on a 330 milliamp hour battery, so you can expect good performance there as well. One thing I will say about batteries in this drone, I've used this frame before on other builds, and I've noticed that sometimes you can have a little bit of a hard time fitting certain 2S batteries into the frame. Specifically, in the past, I've tried to use RDQ's 450 milliamp hour batteries, and I find those to be a really tight fit inside that frame. I don't know if you'd see that with every battery, but it's just something to be aware of. Finally, we've got to talk about the camera and HDZero video system in this whoop. Like I said, I'm really glad they decided to use the Nano HDZero camera in this build. I really like that camera. I think it performs really well, especially for its size and weight, and so it was a really good choice to put in a whoop. I'm not going to do a full review of that camera again. I actually have a complete review video of it with tons of flight footage in different situations, so I'm going to link that if you want to see more footage from this camera. But like I said, it performs really well. You can get a beautiful image out of this camera, and it's capable in all lighting conditions. So, you know, with a whoop, sometimes you might want to fly indoors where the light's a little bit lower, or maybe you want to fly out in your yard at night. And I think you're going to find that this camera is pretty capable and it's able to let you see in all of those conditions. I'm really happy with this choice. It's just so nice to see this video quality in something as small as a whoop. In terms of video signal and video performance, this is using the same HDZero Whoop VTX that's been available for a while. I've used it in several builds and I've always been really happy with its performance. I don't really have any issues there. I know one thing I was wondering about, and maybe you are too, is how it works with that little dipole antenna, because I know normally I use larger antennas on my builds. I actually found that antenna to work pretty well. I didn't have any trouble in my backyard or inside my house, and at one point I even flew around to the front of my house, and although I started getting breakup, it was still flyable and it was actually a better signal than I typically get with analog. I'll also mention that for this test, I had stubby antennas on the video receiver and I was facing in the complete opposite direction of the drone. So I'm facing away from my house and I've flown behind myself, behind my house, over to the other side, and you can see that this is still flyable. I don't think you're gonna have any trouble flying this in the normal situations where you'd fly a whoop. You know, Express LRS is gonna give you all kinds of control range. You're not gonna have any problems there. And on the video side, I felt like the signal was generally better than what I've normally seen from analog in the same conditions. If you fly really far away from yourself, you will start getting some breakup. In these shots, it had been raining earlier, so these trees are wet, and that's particularly bad for video signal. But again, I didn't really find it to be a problem, and I felt like this was more than capable for being a whoop. To give you an overall impression of the flight experience, I was really happy with it, had a lot of fun flying this whoop. You know, I feel like it's capable and nimble, it has good flight time, and it has plenty of power for flying fast or doing freestyle tricks. And in terms of video, the HDZero is just such a big step forward from analog. It's just so much fun to have good video quality in something that's this small and this lightweight. I had a really good time flying it. So you've seen the specs, you've seen some flights. Let me give you my thoughts on the Mobula7 HDZero. Honestly, this is exactly the whoop I wanted to see. I've actually tried to build this myself in the past. I started from a Mobula7 and I added an external Express LRS receiver and an HDZero VTX and camera and just kind of tried to build something similar. But I feel like they've done it better than I could, and it's clean and it just works out of the box. And so I'm really happy with everything they've decided to do here. The motors are sized really well for this application. There's plenty of power and it didn't feel sluggish at all. I'm excited about that new flight controller from Happy Model. I love having Express LRS built in, so that's really good to see. And the HDZero equipment just performs so well. That Nano HDZero camera looks really good, and the HDZero Whoop VTX is proven and it works really well. Really happy with all the parts they've chosen to use on this whoop. You know, whoops are a lot of fun. It's actually most of what I fly. I love being able to just go out in the backyard and fly around, or I can fly inside my house. And having that increased image quality from the HDZero just really takes it to the next level and just really gives you so much of a more fun experience with this whoop. I think we've always accepted that Whoops have bad image quality because they're small and have to be so lightweight, but this is proving that wrong. I mean, the HDZero adds so much to it. It makes it look so much better, you can see where you're going better, and to me, it just makes for a more fun experience. And the extremely low latency of HDZero and Express LRS mean that this Whoop is really responsive. You'd have no trouble racing with it, you can fly it indoors no problem. It's just a really good, well-rounded product and something that I had a lot of fun with. I know I'm going to be flying it a lot going forward. The other reason I'm really excited about this Whoop is because I think it's going to open up HDZero to a lot of new pilots. You know, everyone so far that's been using HDZero has had to build it themselves. They've had to solder the VTX themselves onto their board and figure out how to fit everything in. And I mean, that's something I've done a lot of. I've made videos on it, but even for me, it's not always something that I want to do. You know, sometimes it's a nice feeling to just pull something out of the box and just have it work and not have to do a bunch of wiring or a bunch of configuration and have to do a lot of research to figure out how to set it up. You know, with this, you just pull it out of the box, do a quick firmware update, bind it to the transmitter, and you're ready to go fly. I think it's going to be great. I think this is going to be much better for new pilots to get into, and that's something I'm excited about. If you're new to HDZero, I think this would pair pretty well with the Scout HD goggles. That would get you a drone and goggles for really not that much money. And then the only other thing you'd need to fly is a transmitter that supports Express LRS. You may already have that, or if you don't, there are a couple of options out there. But it's really a good introduction to the system, and it's something that would be quick and easy to set up. Even for experienced pilots, I mean, I have several HDZero drones at this point, but I'm actually still interested in this, and this is something that I would buy and use because, like I said, I don't always want to have to set that stuff up. Sometimes I just want to be able to pull it out of the box and fly. And honestly, I think they've done a better job building a Whoop than I do most of the time. So I think that this is a compelling product both for new or experienced users. When I do reviews, I always try and think about what the product doesn't do well or what I'd like to see them do in a version 2. And so I tried to think about that with this one and what I'd like to see them do differently. And honestly, I had a really hard time coming up with anything. I mean, it does everything I want it to do. It's got Express LRS, HDZero. Those are two technologies that I think are really good. And everything about it is just the parts I would have chosen. It performs the way I want it to perform. It's really hard to have any complaints. I mean, I guess if I had to say anything, I'd say that I'd like it to support that 500 Hertz mode for Express LRS, but I mean, that's kind of reaching a little bit. It's really good the way it is. I mean, I'm really happy with this product. I think you can probably tell. I think it's a really good Whoop. In terms of whether I think you should buy one, it's probably obvious that I like this drone quite a bit, but I also think that you probably know whether you'd rather buy this or build your own. You know, some people are really into picking out the parts and building their own Whoop, and so the parts are out there if you want to do that. But for the rest of us that prefer just pulling something out of the box and being able to use it, I think this is a really great option. If this had been available when I got into HDZero, I think it's where I would have started. And this is what I would recommend to you if you want something that you can just pick up and immediately go out and fly and enjoy HDZero. So guys, that's going to do it for this review. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Mobula7 HDZero. Like I've been saying, I'm really excited about this. I think it's a big step forward for HDZero, and I think we're going to see a lot more people getting to experience it and coming into the system. So I think that that's going to be really fun and really cool to see. I don't know exactly where this drone's going to be available. I'm not sure which retailers are carrying it yet, but I'm going to put links down in the description below as soon as we have that information. So you can always look down in the description to find places to buy this drone. If you're new to my channel, thanks for being here. I'm glad you're here. I talk a lot on this channel about things like Express LRS and HDZero, so if you enjoyed the video, I'd encourage you to subscribe so that you can see more. I do have more videos planned. I'll have more stuff coming soon on these topics, so definitely check that out. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.